Amaka Onwachekwa woke up to the soft cries of her 6-month-old son, Chimobi. The early morning sun was filtering through the cracks in the wooden window, casting gentle lines of light across the small bedroom. She reached for the basket of clean diapers, humming quietly to soothe him. Chimobi's tiny legs kicked in the air as she laid him on the mat, his round cheeks still warm from sleep. With practiced hands, she untied the strings of his cloth diaper. But the moment it loosened, her breath caught in her throat. Inside, coiled tightly as if guarding a treasure, was a small green snake. Its body glistened in the light, scales catching the gold of the morning sun. The serpent's head lifted slightly, tongue flicking in and out, hissing softly, a sound so faint yet sharp enough to slice through her heartbeat. For a second, Amaka could not move. Her hands trembled above her son, her mind screaming for her to act but her body frozen in shock. Chimobi looked up at her with innocent eyes, unaware of the danger nestled so close to his fragile skin. She wanted to scream, but the fear had stolen her voice. The snake shifted, its small tail twitching against the cloth, and that was when her chest finally burst with sound. Her scream tore through the quiet compound, echoing against the walls. It was sharp, desperate, filled with a terror only a mother could know. Chimobi began to cry, startled by her sudden shout. She snatched him up in her arms, holding him tightly against her chest, her body moving back instinctively, putting as much distance as possible between her baby and that thing in the diaper. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the corridor outside. Neighbors rushed in, their faces drawn with alarm, but Amaka could barely form words, only pointing with a shaking hand toward the mat. The green snake remained there, still coiled, its unblinking eyes watching them. In that moment, Amaka knew deep in her soul this was no ordinary morning. Something had on tear. Amaka's scream ripped through the air, so loud and desperate that it startled birds from the nearby mango tree. Her voice carried across the compound, pulling people from their sleep and morning chores. Doors banged open, feet pounded the dusty ground, and within seconds, neighbors began to gather, their eyes wide, wondering what could make a young mother cry out like that. Mama Efani, the elderly woman who lived in the next room, was the first to rush in. Her wrapper was loosely tied, her gray hair messy from sleep, but her hands were steady as she followed Amaka's trembling finger toward the mat. Her eyes narrowed when she saw the small green snake still coiled inside the open diaper, its head slowly moving, as if studying everyone in the room. Without a word, she snatched a long stick from behind the door. With one swift, practice strike, she pinned the snake to the mat and crushed it with a final blow. The hiss faded, but the silence that followed felt heavy. Mama Efani's chest rose and fell, her eyes still fixed on the dead creature. She spat on the floor and said in a low, firm voice, "This is not ordinary." Her words hung in the air, making the small crowd shift uneasily. Everyone in the compound knew she had lived long enough to see things others only whispered about. Amaka clutched Chimobi tighter, her heart still pounding. She could feel his tiny heartbeat against her own, the baby's small fingers gripping her wrapper. She wanted to believe it was over now that the snake was dead, but Mama Efani's warning sent a cold shiver through her. Neighbors began murmuring to each other, some making the sign of the cross, others glancing at Amaka with pity, as if she had just stepped into the beginning of something she couldn't yet understand. Mama Efani slowly turned to her, eyes serious. "You must be careful," she said. "Some snakes come from the bush. Others are sent." And with that, she walked out, leaving Amaka frozen in place, holding her child as. Even after the neighbors left and the compound grew quiet again, Amaka could not stop shaking. She sat on the edge of the bed, Chimobi cradled in her arms, staring at the now empty mat where the snake had been. The question kept pounding in her head, how could a snake end up inside a closed diaper, in a house with the doors and windows locked all night? It didn't make sense. She replayed the morning over and over, searching for an answer, but every thought only deepened her unease. When Obinna returned from his early errands, she told him everything, her voice trembling as she described how she had found the snake. His brows furrowed, but instead of sharing her fear, he waved a hand as if brushing away a bad smell. "It must have slithered in from outside," he said firmly. "You know these creatures find their way through the smallest holes. Maybe it hid inside the diaper before you brought it in from the basket." Amaka shook her head quickly. "No, Obinna. I folded those diapers myself last night. I tied the basket with cloth. Everything was closed. And how could it get into our house? The doors were locked." She searched his eyes, hoping he would understand the weight of her words, but he only sighed, clearly wanting to end the conversation. "You're letting fear cloud your mind," he told her. "It's just a snake. It's over now. Forget about it." But forgetting was impossible. The memory of its cold, unblinking eyes stayed with her, and beneath the fear, something else was growing, a heavy, unshakable feeling that this was not random. It felt deliberate, as if the snake had been placed there, as if someone, or something, had chosen her son. All day, she caught herself glancing at shadows, jumping at the rustle of leaves outside the window. Every creak of the wooden floor made her heart skip. She didn't know how or why, but deep inside, Amaka was certain, this was not over. The snake was not just an animal. It was a message, and it was meant for her child. 2 nights later, the air inside the small house felt unusually heavy. Amaka lay half asleep, listening to the soft sound of Chimobi's breathing from his crib. The moonlight slipped in through the window, casting pale silver shapes across the floor. Just as she began to drift off, a faint, sharp hiss cut through the silence. Her eyes flew open. She turned toward the crib, her heart already pounding. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. But then she saw it, a snake, larger than the first, its dark green body coiled neatly at the foot of her baby's crib. The dim light caught the glisten of its scales, and its head swayed slowly from side to side, tongue flicking out as if tasting the air. Amaka's breath caught in her throat. She froze for a moment, terrified to make a move. Chimobi was still asleep, his small chest rising and falling peacefully, completely unaware of the danger inches away. But then something made her blood run cold, the faint red glow on his skin. His birthmark, a small crescent shape just above his right hip, was shining softly, as though lit from within. Her first instinct was to scream for Obina, but fear gripped her so tightly that no sound escaped. She took a cautious step closer, her eyes never leaving the snake. The hiss grew louder, almost like a warning. She could feel her palms damp with sweat, her legs trembling under her. In one swift motion, she reached into the crib and scooped Chimobi into her arms, holding him tightly against her chest. The moment she lifted him, the snake uncoiled slightly, its eyes fixed on her, unblinking. She backed away slowly, never turning her back until she was out of the room. Obina came rushing from the other side of the house at the sound of her hurried steps. But when he returned with a stick, the snake was gone, leaving only the faint glow from Chimobi's birthmark fading into the darkness. That night, Amaka knew without doubt this was no accident. Something was coming for. The morning after the second snake appeared, Amaka went straight to Mama Ifani's room, her mind restless and her heart heavy. The old woman was sitting outside on a low stool, peeling cassava, her face calm but her eyes sharp, as if she had been expecting her. Amaka told her everything, the snake at the crib, the glowing birthmark, the way it had disappeared without a trace. Mama Ifani listened without interrupting, her hands moving slowly, her gaze fixed on Amaka in a way that made her skin prickle. When Amaka finished, the old woman set the cassava aside and leaned closer. "This is not just about snakes," she said in a low voice. "In your late mother's village, there is a story. They say the child marked by the moon will be visited by the serpent until a debt is paid." Amaka's eyes widened. "Marked by the moon," she whispered, instantly thinking of Chimobi's crescent-shaped birthmark. Mama Ifani nodded slowly. "That mark is not ordinary. It is a sign. And the serpent is not an animal, it is a messenger. It will keep coming until the promise made before the child's birth is fulfilled." Her words unlocked something in Amaka's memory, the nights when her mother, lying weak on her sickbed, would hold her hand and say strange things. "Protect your first son, never let him sleep alone on certain nights, keep him away from water under the moonlight." Back then, Amaka had dismissed them as the ramblings of a dying woman. But now, each warning came rushing back with terrifying clarity. "Why didn't my mother tell me the whole truth?" Amaka's voice cracked. "Sometimes," Mama Ifani said quietly, "truth is too heavy to carry until the time comes. And child, I think your time has come." The old woman's words settled like a weight in Amaka's chest. She looked down at Chimobi, sleeping peacefully in her arms, and felt the air grow colder around her. If the legend was true, the snakes were not random, they were a calling. And something deep inside told her the debt. The same day, unable to rest, Amaka wrapped Chimobi tightly on her back and set out for her mother's village. Her feet carried her straight to the compound of Elder Namdi, her mother's eldest brother. The old man was sitting under the shade of a mango tree, chewing kola nut, his eyes narrowing when he saw her approach. She didn't waste time with greetings, the fear in her heart was too urgent. "Uncle, I need the truth," she said, her voice trembling. "Something is after my child." Mama Ifani spoke of a debt, a serpent. "What does it mean?" For a long moment, Elder Namdi said nothing. He kept turning the kola nut in his palm, his gaze fixed on the ground. Finally, he sighed heavily, the sound carrying years of unspoken weight. Your mother, he began slowly, was desperate for a child. After many barren years, she went to a shrine deep in the forest. That shrine was guarded by a serpent spirit. The priest there gave her a fertility potion, but such gifts are never free. Amaka's breath caught. What was the price? He looked at her with tired eyes. She promised to return what was given, when the spirit came to collect. The words hung in the air like a curse. Amaka shook her head. Return what was given? I don't understand. You are her only daughter. And Chimobi, he is your only son, Elder Namdi said gravely. The spirit does not want you. It wants him. He is the gift the shrine gave, and now, it has come to claim him. Amaka felt the blood drain from her face. She staggered back a step, clutching Chimobi tighter, as if her arms alone could shield him from an ancient promise made long before his birth. The sound of rustling leaves above them seemed to echo the warning in her uncle's words. There is no running from this, Elder Namdi added quietly. If you do nothing, the serpent will not stop. Amaka met his gaze, fear burning into determination. She didn't know how yet, but one thing was certain. She would not let the spirit take her child. That evening, Amaka followed a narrow path through the edge of the forest, the sun dipping low behind the trees. She carried Chimobi close, his small head resting against her shoulder, while her mind replayed her uncle's words. Her destination was the compound of Enkay Chika, a priestess both feared and respected across the region. People spoke of her in whispers, saying she could see into the world of spirits and bend fate itself. When Amaka arrived, Chika was sitting cross-legged on a mat, her neck heavy with beads, eyes half closed as if she already knew why Amaka had come. You carry fear like a shadow, the priestess said without opening her eyes. Sit. Amaka obeyed, her voice breaking as she explained the snakes, the glowing birthmark, the legend, and her uncle's confession. Chika listened in silence, her gaze never leaving Chimobi. When Amaka finished, the priestess finally spoke. The serpent is not your enemy. It is a messenger of the spirit that owns the debt. Killing it only stirs its master's anger. You cannot fight it with sticks and stones. Amaka's heart sank. Then what can I do? Chika's eyes gleamed in the dim light. To save your son, you must rewrite his destiny before the spirit's claim becomes final. This can only be done through a midnight ritual at the shrine where the debt began. A chill ran through Amaka. Midnight? At the shrine? Yes, Chika said firmly. You will bring the child. Blood will speak for blood. Only then can his life be unbound from the promise your mother made. Fear tightened around Amaka's chest, but when she looked at Chimobi's sleeping face, she felt a wave of resolve. She didn't care how dangerous it was, she would face anything if it meant protecting him. Chika began to prepare, grinding herbs, tying charms, and placing cowrie shells into a small leather pouch. The scent of burning incense filled the air. Tonight, the priestess said, we walk into the darkness. But if your heart wavers, the darkness. The forest was silent except for the crunch of dry leaves beneath their feet as Amaka followed Enkay Chika through the narrow, winding path. The moon hung high, casting pale light that barely touched the shadows under the towering trees. Chimobi stirred softly against her chest, but she held him close, whispering to keep him calm. Every step deeper into the forest felt heavier, the air colder, as if unseen eyes were watching. They reached a small clearing where a weathered shrine stood, its stones covered in moss, the air thick with the smell of incense and something older, something wild. Chika motioned for Amaka to stand in the center. Do not step out of the circle, she warned, scattering white chalk powder around them. Almost instantly, the first snake appeared, sliding out from the darkness. Then another, and another, until the ground around the circle seemed alive with slithering bodies. They moved slowly, not striking, just surrounding. Amaka's grip on Chimobi tightened, her heart racing, but she forced herself to stay still. Chika began to chant in a deep, rhythmic voice, her words in an ancient tongue Amaka didn't understand. The sound seemed to make the snakes sway, their heads lifting as if in response. The priestess stepped forward, holding a small blade carved from bone. Amaka's stomach clenched as Chika took her hand. Your blood will speak for your son, she said. Without hesitation, she sliced Amaka's palm. The sting burned hot, and blood began to drip onto the earth. Chika dipped her fingers into it, then gently pressed them to Chimobi's forehead, drawing a strange, curved symbol. The moment the mark was complete, the snakes drew closer, hissing in unison. The air vibrated with the sound, and the hairs on Amaka's neck stood on end. She shut her eyes, whispering a silent prayer, refusing to let fear make her step back. Chika's chanting grew louder, her voice echoing into the night. The snakes began to retreat, disappearing into the darkness. The clearing had fallen into a strange silence, the air heavy and still. Amaka thought it was over, but then a rustle came from the far edge of the shrine. Out of the shadows, a massive snake emerged, far larger than any she had seen before. Its thick, dark green body glistened under the moonlight, its scales patterned like ancient carvings. Its eyes, bright and unblinking, locked directly on Shimobi. Amaka's breath caught. Her arms tightened protectively around her son, but her feet felt rooted to the ground. The snake moved slowly, each glide of its body making the earth seem to tremble. It stopped just at the edge of the chalk circle, its head lifting high, swaying side to side as if studying them. Shimobi stirred in her arms, and the faint red glow of his crescent birthmark began to shine again, brighter than before. The snake's gaze shifted to the mark, and for a terrifying moment, Amaka thought it would strike. Instead, it slid forward, crossing into the circle without hesitation. Her heart pounded as the creature coiled gently around her arm, its smooth scales cold against her skin. She didn't dare move. The snake's head rose until it was level with her face, its tongue flicking in and out, tasting the air between them. Then, in one slow, deliberate motion, it hissed, a low, deep sound that felt more like a statement than a threat. Shimobi's glow began to fade as the snake loosened its coil. It slid down her arm, its body brushing against her side before disappearing back into the darkness of the forest. The moment it was gone, the last trace of red light vanished from Shimobi's birthmark, leaving only smooth, untouched skin. Amaka stood frozen, her breath shaking, trying to understand what had just happened. Enkay Chika's voice broke the silence. The spirit has accepted your blood. The dead is closed. Amaka looked down at her son, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger that had just passed. Relief washed over her, but so did the weight of WH. Weeks passed, and the compound returned to its quiet rhythm. The nights were calm, the days warm, and no snake had appeared since that night in the forest. Amaka began to sleep without waking at every sound, though her ears still caught the faintest rustle in the grass. Shimobi grew stronger, his laughter filling the small house, the crescent birthmark on his skin now nothing more than a pale shadow. Neighbors, still curious, would sometimes ask her what really happened. At first, she avoided the details, but eventually she began to speak, her voice steady but soft. She told them of the snakes, the warning from Mama Ifani, the truth her uncle revealed, and the night she walked into the forest with Enkay Chika. She described the way the largest serpent had looked into her eyes, how its hiss had felt like an agreement, and how her son's glow had vanished when it left. Her words carried a quiet warning. Some dangers you can see, she told them, others are born with you, carried in your blood, waiting for the right time to rise. Some listened with fear, others with disbelief, but all could see the certainty in her eyes. One morning, Amaka walked to the edge of her compound with a small young tree she had bought from the market. She dug the earth herself, the smell of fresh soil mixing with the cool breeze. With Shimobi playing nearby, she planted the tree firmly, patting the dirt around its roots. To her, it was more than a tree. It was a marker, a living memory of the night she stood surrounded by snakes and refused to surrender her child. She knew life would not always be safe, but this tree would grow as a silent reminder of the strength a mother could summon when her child's life hung in the balance. And whenever she looked at it, she would remember the vow she made that night, that no matter what darkness came, she would face it head on, as she had faced the serpent, and she would never let anything take her son from her.